All right, so I'm going through and organizing some of my preps, and I realized that I had some old COVID era preps stashed away that didn't make it into the rotation. And so I thought I'd take this opportunity to remind everybody that you need to check for those 5-year-old preps now. Yes, it's been 5 years since COVID because many of them are likely expired, and there are some things to consider about particular products if they've reached that expiration date that I want to go over based on everything you see here on the workbench. So before we get into that, I want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them I can get out here, give you good information like this, and hopefully help you get better prepared in the future. So a big thanks to Midway USA for supporting the preparedness community. Now, these things are things you need to check now, just in case you did what a lot of people did back in 2020, which was buy a ton of stuff and stash it away in case things got worse, especially related to lockdowns, which is totally understandable. But if anything fell through the cracks in your rotation and everything else related to your pantry, well, some of those things could be problematic now. So for example, I've got multivitamins and pain relievers over here on the end. Over-the-counter drugs have expiration dates, and these are definitely expired because, like I said, this is all COVID era stuff right here. Now, what happens with OTCs when they expire? Well, most of the time, depending on what they are, of course, but in general, they just lose efficacy. So they're not going to be as efficient at providing whatever symptom relief you're looking for or whatever nutritional value you're hoping for from a multivitamin, but they're still possibly capable of adding some of that relief or nutrition. So those are things to consider before you just throw everything away. You might just want to understand that, yeah, it might not work as well as it used to, and make that decision from there, okay? Now, a similar thing could be said about mouthwash. Now, this mouthwash was also COVID era. It is expired. Now, what happens when mouthwash expires? It basically begins to break down, right? And it becomes watered down, less effective, very similar to the OTCs, and it can actually create an environment where it allows for bacterial growth because the alcohol inside is breaking down and it's basically turning to water. So it could actually be bad for you in some sense, and that's something you definitely want to consider before using the mouthwash, especially because if it's no longer effective, then it's not really doing the job that you intend to do. The same thing can be said about hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide breaks down and basically turns into water and oxygen. And at that point, it's no longer a disinfectant. And now it's not necessarily dangerous, but the problem is that if you're using it to clean a wound per se, well, it's not going to do a good job of doing that anymore. And that could lead to an infection down the road or whatever else might happen. So definitely, in my opinion, you would want to get rid of hydrogen peroxide that's from the COVID timeline, right? And then we also have things like bleach. I don't know if you remember, but back then during the lockdowns, it was really hard to get a hold of bleach, laundry detergent, and a lot of that other stuff. Now, bleach is more important than things like laundry detergent because it's used as a disinfectant, and obviously, very similarly to the hydrogen peroxide, it starts to break down over time as well and eventually becomes salt water for the most part. And at that point, it's not really doing the job that you would hope bleach would do. And this one in particular is actually the no splash or low splash version, which means it's all gelled up and gunked up in there and pretty much worthless. So these are just things I wanted to bring to your attention. Like a lot of this stuff is going to end up being just trash that I found, but I thought it was good to just kind of review this because of how long ago that really was. I mean, 5 years is kind of the cutoff date for a lot of these products. Now, toothpaste is another interesting one. Okay, now this toothpaste is expired. I wish it wasn't because I should have just used it because now it's kind of like wasted money possibly. What happens with toothpaste? The same thing as most of this other stuff. It becomes less effective. But because of what's in toothpaste, it can also start to taste bad or smell bad and could have some issues with bacterial growth as well. So is it really worth it if it's just going to taste bad, smell bad, so probably not help your breath, and not even clean your teeth properly, right? So those are all considerations to make. Now, here's the one that actually got me thinking about this topic because I was checking some of my MREs and some of my food ration bars I use for like get-home bags and things of that nature, and we're right on the cusp of their expiration. In fact, this UST emergency food ration bar right here is expiring March of 2025, and it was produced in March of 2020, and so this is a COVID-era ration bar that's just about to expire. Now, what happens with ration bars as well as MREs, which these are also from that exact timeline and generally have about a 5-year shelf life, right? What happens with them when they expire? Well, here's the thing. You're going to be concerned about, taste and nutritional deficiencies. So it might not taste as good as it used to, and it might not have as much nutritional value. And that's unfortunate, but not necessarily harmful, right? So it's just a consideration to make before you just throw everything away, right? Like it might just not taste as good and not might give me as much nutrition as I was hoping for, but at the same time, like it's still food, right? But the other thing you have to keep in mind is because it is food, there's still a possibility of bacterial growth and things like that. So you would want to check for things like if the packaging is damaged or if there's any swelling or anything else that would give you signs of it possibly being spoiled. And at that point in time, you would definitely want to throw it away because the health risks highly outweigh the benefit of just eating something because you're hungry, right? And of course, all of this is in the same vein as like your canned goods and everything else. Always check for those signs before you decide to eat something. But these specifically have that 5-year cutoff date, which is why I wanted to bring it up because we're right on top of that right now. Literally, it's been 5 years since 2020. And it feels like a fever dream, doesn't it? But here we are, and I just thought this was a good reminder because, well, apparently I did a bad job of keeping things organized to the point of being able to rotate them out. So I've got to do a better job at that in the future, but I'm sure many of you might be in the same boat, and I thought this could be helpful. So let me know down in the comments below, what COVID-era preps do you still have that you've been hanging on to that maybe aren't going to do what you want them to do anymore and might become trash? And what COVID-era preps do you have that are actually still good to go that you're very glad that you still have because they'll be useful until they're not, right? And these are all just things that I think help everybody remember that this is what we have to do. Maintain your preps, organize them, rotate them out, and sometimes throw things away when they're no longer going to do the job that you want them to do. Anything else you need from me at all, go to magicprepper.com. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.